let's watch some of this. I'm a big fan of this, and I think even somebody who doesn't really have any context for who the guy was, I think can get a lot out of this. So let's watch some of this lecture.
So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Michael Brooks to Lafayette.
Hi. It's really good to be here. Can everybody hear me without a mic?
Yeah.
All right. I've only seen this in the movies, but I feel like I'm gonna like lean on the board and get the chalk all over my jacket. Does that actually happen, Professor? All right, so I'm okay. So I'll keep these opening remarks relatively brief because I think it's always more interesting and fun if we can actually talk to and engage with each other. Unless you're calling into my show, in which case I keep the calls tight. So I want to hit on three themes. I'll talk a little bit about myself and how I came to be where I am. Briefly, it might be interesting. What this book is about and how it fits into the larger project. And I guess I will make a few-minute case for the candidate that I strongly prefer in this election cycle. So I have a pretty unusual background in some ways, which I guess is appropriate for unusual times. My parents were hippies, and they left New York when I was very little. They were totally broke, to be honest, and we sort of fled to Massachusetts in the kind of middle of nowhere, and it felt like the middle of nowhere. It's not actual middle of nowhere, but that's what I thought as a little kid. Like, can I swear? Sure. And why the fuck are we leaving New York? This is so boring. And they were very influenced by the counterculture. And I was homeschooled, and it was very self-directed. So I won't get too much into that. I think there's advantages and disadvantages to going that route. But one advantage I did have was I was able to do a lot of reading and a lot of very self-directed reading in any area that interested me. And I happen to be very particularly interested in, when I was middle school, teenage age, I got very entranced with politics, specifically movements in the 60s around civil rights and how they connected to global rights. And that led to my interest in international relations, Latin America, and so on. I ended up going to Bates College and studied international relations, and I spent time in the Middle East and studied in Turkey and studied the relationship between the European Union and Turkey. And then I worked in brand strategy and meditation for a minute, try to make my parents happy. And
I love that little. I mean, that's just such a, that one little line in passing, like that joke, semi not a joke, tells you a lot about his family. But anyway, let's go.
And was unemployed because this was after 2008 financial crash. And I ended up getting a job as a producer on a show called The Majority Report, which when I started, I thought honestly I would do for a year and then I would bag it and go to graduate school. And then I started subbing on the show and hosting. And I realized this is what I'd like to do. I never thought I could do it. I never thought there was any path to making a living in media, let alone in television hosting. I didn't have the resources to go do a bunch of summer internships. I didn't even know how one did this. I'd look at like Chris Matthews on TV and I'd be like, where did this come from? How does one do this? You sit around, Capitol Hill and beg people for internships. And I guess a couple decades later, you're literally perched on TV talking nonsense. A lot of opinions. So I launched my own show a couple of years ago, and I focus a lot on international affairs. And I definitely would call myself and am a democratic socialist, which is, a trendy term now. And we try to actually bridge that with some very, very important kind of Marxist frame for understanding the world. It's an interesting dynamic because I think these ideas are really important and the moment is super opportune. And at the same time, I also, like, I want us to be what we call sometimes the pre-mainstream, right? Like, I don't want to be in the margins. I want us to win. I think we have the best program. So I'm not interested in being on the outside protesting. That's important. But I want us to actually implement. And I want us to communicate with as broad a variety of people as possible. If you do online politics, especially a couple of years ago, you all of a sudden encounter this group of twerps. I guess, anyway, does the civility principle not apply to the speaker? I'm just kidding. I love everybody. But I don't like everybody, but I try to love everybody, right? And they called themselves the intellectual dark web, this group of twerps. And what I noticed was that, one, it was a lot of hiding of the ball. Most of these things were just traditional conservative and I want to be really clear. When I say conservative, guys, I don't just mean Republican. I mean conservative. How many people are familiar with the New Republic in the 1990s? Not today. 1990s, 1980s New Republic? No reason you should be. That means you guys are all having great college lives. And I encourage that. But in the 1990s, the New Republic, and the 1980s, they used to say it was considered to be somewhat liberal, but the line that they would say is that it was even the New Republic was the joke. And that was because they always would find a way to either support Reagan administration foreign policy or demonize African Americans or wage a war on poor people. But it was always, I mean, look, we're not one of these conservatives. We're not like that. We're enlightened liberals. Here's why we have to do what all the conservatives want. And so the IDW struck me as very much in that vein. And so I did videos and I debunked and I, had to listen to Sam Harris kind of drearily talk about Islam and, and Jordan Peterson has this. Yeah. For a guy who talks a lot about like traditional gender roles and whatnot, why does he sound like a 50s housewife? I mean, we're here, in Brooklyn being like, yeah, we're socialists who support transgender rights, but we're not crying every 2 seconds. So this is a little trying to present what happens on the show. So we did that content. And Dave Rubin was, I mean, come on, right? It's just, I almost feel bad at this point. He was just this kind of like, I don't know how many of you are familiar. I hope, actually, how many people are generally familiar with these kinds of figures? Yeah. So it's really, you're lucky. So it's really sort of inundated in this environment. And, Dave would just sort of stand, just sort of stare blankly into space. And, Sam Harris would be like, it's really, it's like Nazi Germany because blah, blah, blah. And he's just like, wow, it's like Nazi Germany. Okay. And then people would come with you and they go, these ideas are so important. And what's interesting is in the process of writing this book, because you have to make it bigger than these people. Like this particular scene and act of self-branding is already almost over, and I didn't write the book in time for it to be in the zeitgeist that way. But the arguments that they're using, this is what you're going to see from every single right-wing movement in the future or center-right movement in the future that does not explicitly identify as nationalist or alt-right. The arguments that they're making about why capitalism just is, that's science, why we're not promoting racism or sexism, but we are very interested in some extremely antiquated ideas about scientific differences, quote unquote, right? So what you're seeing in these arguments, and I'm just going to bring in two other things because there's a lot to cover here and I can kind of get lost in the weeds. A basic difference I would say between left and right is the difference between historicizing and naturalizing. If you're on the left, broadly speaking, You look at things and you say, what are the historical, material reasons why that is happening? If you're on the right, you say that is what it is. Now, paradoxically, this is actually a reason why right now there's a lot of conflict between people who are more socialistic and people who are more like woke, quote unquote, because their moral dimension is better. Look, America is a racist society is correct. Acknowledging that truth versus denying that truth is a major difference, no question. However, if you read Adolf Reed, who's one of my intellectual heroes, I really hope everybody is reading him, he will tell you why racism and white supremacy is a multi-generational project in America that depends on economic conditions, that manifests in different geographies, that is inseparable for how we produce and do capitalism. And actually, it might become separable, right? Whereas some people who have a woke discourse, it just is. It's the religious foundation of America. There's no difference between any different historical periods. It's just this moral block statement. Does that make sense? So some of these critiques can get really subtle, and that's actually what started to occur to me with the IDW and dealing with the right, because these guys were exploiting a lot of weaknesses. They were coming in and they were seeing people, you know, look, if your pop culture diet, and let's say you're an alienated young man, which is the primary audience for these guys. That's just market demographics. That's not a moral statement. I did some brand work. This is just like you're looking at your demos. You're alienated. You don't feel powerful. You probably have a lot of actually very valid complaints in your life. You flip open, say, some, you know, mediocre bougie website that you think is the left, and what do you have? Seinfeld's actually problematic, and you suck, and shut the fuck up, and this is a problem, and that's a problem, and this is this, and that. Da, da, da. And then Jordan Peterson comes along and goes, no, actually, you're great, and you should have a government-provided wife to massage you. Now, and you didn't have people coming and saying, why? Why do you feel that you do? Right? So, because even in terms of relative privilege becomes in macro questions, like in your personal behavior, yes, it's relevant. If you're walking around thinking you're the most victimized person in the world and you're not, it's obnoxious and it's problematic, sure. But in the big picture, nobody outside of an incredible, minute fraction of the population is doing better right now. Yes, you can talk about aggregate numbers and people have more washing machines and cell phones and blah, blah, blah. I know all of that. So please do save those questions and comments. Let's go more interesting. But inequality is rising. Alienation from the work you do is rising. Your ability to govern your own life is decreasing radically. And so you had people who were giving reactionary but constructive, proactive answers, and also empowering people's individual agency, which is funny as a socialist, I think is super important. We need a socialism that also has room for people's personal aspirations and ambitions and sense of making room for themselves in the world. We cannot make that wrong. And in fact, the only people that I really see making that wrong are usually very upper middle class bougie people. And I don't make that as like a moral comment. I'm talking like literally that's their position. They don't have to do that. You know, I could tell you as someone, and I don't want to melodrama my own experience, but it's like, I know what it's like to be pretty broke at times and have like the heat turned off or whatever. So you understand why you might want to read some type of Horatio Alger narrative, right? So the IDW had answers and the right had answers and the left had a lot of, the quote unquote left had a lot of moralism and condemnation and not even that much nutrition. I think that is why, among many other things, including the really powerful social movements we have in the world today, and the very important ones on race and economic equity and so on, this is actually also why Bernie Sanders matters. Bernie Sanders is running a campaign that should be really basic and really obvious, but it's not, because we're not in basic and obvious. We are at a level of extreme radical, systemic inequality. And that's also where we are in terms of our phase of capitalism. Like, yeah, with a more liberal approach, you could juice it a little bit. You can, in fact, you could do a lot of what he's talking about. You can decommodify healthcare. You can make it a public good. You can say that the concentration of wealth cannot be this exactly extreme and ludicrous. But in the big picture, the room for new markets is shrinking. I mean, take away the morals of it. When we were going through the Industrial Revolution or the Consumer Goods Revolution, someone came along and said, hey, can you give me investment? Because I want, you know, all of a sudden America's going to have a middle class, which was absolutely generated by government spending, let's be real, you know, in the post-World War II. And I want, you know, but I want to sell people dishwashers. Can I have some capital for it? Okay. And then millions of people will buy dishwashers. What phase of capitalism are we in now? WeWork was market value. Software put billions of dollars into it's like a place where you commune, man. And that's partially because really there is a shrinking amount of untapped, like primitive accumulation, right? So what you have in Bernie Sanders is someone who has an inkling of a recognition of that. And he, by going out and talking about your student loans and how you're objectively materially fucked, is doing more to de-radicalize people in that discourse online than almost anybody else in the modern scene. I also think foreign policy is really important. And in him, I see the only candidate who's willing to speak somewhat clearly about the Middle East, somewhat clearly about India. He called for freeing President Lula, who people should really look up. He was an extraordinary president who led Brazil, lifted 40 million people out of poverty. And he almost certainly would have been reelected president in 2018 if there was not an illegitimate process that put him in jail. He was recently freed because the prosecutorial team was humiliated. I'm always happy to talk about that. So, and I had the honor of interviewing him recently in Sao Paulo. So, that's it, guys. I'm ready to talk. I just wanted to give you a little bit of a sense of where I was coming from.
Yeah, I was originally envisioning pausing a bunch of times to talk about things that he just said, but it all just kind of kept flowing, and it was all so good that I didn't, you know, I've seen this several times before, but it's been a little while. That, you know, that I just, you know, there was never a point that, you know, that felt, you know, where I felt all right about stopping that. But yeah, I think that I think somebody coming into this completely fresh, right? You know, no Michael Brooks background whatsoever. This is like a really good, like, yeah, not even 19 minutes because we skipped the first couple minutes of him being introduced. You know, like more, you know, so like 16 minutes or something. You know, crash course, right? You know, we got some Adolf Reed. You know, we got some Lula. We got the you know, we got his analysis of the so-called intellectual dark web and why that's more important. You know, that is important in a way that goes beyond the sort of lifespan of that particular branding exercise. We got the stuff about, you know, socialism and wokeness. We got the you know, we got some like good solid Michael Brooks, you know, shitting on Dave Rubin and Jordan Peterson and Sam Harris.
Filled up my my Michael Brooks bingo card.
Yeah, exactly. And we got actually one of my, I mean, it's a very small point, you know, it's a very small part of that, right? But like one of my favorite Michael things, since it's like the sort of thing that I wouldn't have like really thought of in these terms without him, but I love it, right? The thing about how, you know, uh, you know, you want a way of thinking about socialism and all that, that like um doesn't sort of denigrate kind of personal hustle and sort of trying to make room for yourself in the world. Like I love that, right? That's you know, that's really good. I mean, this is something I talked about in the I don't remember which, but you know, one of the other of those Jacobin articles that I wrote about him. You know, it's something I talked about both in terms of like how it sort of how it sort of changed the way I thought about that, and and how it kind of makes me think about his sort of trajectory. That sort of Michael Brooks constant hustle of like, what's the next project I should be working on? What's the next what's the next thing I should be doing? And but like how it was, but it still felt kind of, I don't know, generous and like big spirited, right? I mean, like he put just as much energy into sort of promoting the work of friends or even just people who he thought had something valuable to say, that as he did into promoting himself, So, and I think it definitely, like, for better or for worse, I'm much more of a workaholic than I probably would have been if I if I had been friends with Michael Brooks. But in any case, that's enough of me babbling about that. You guys have thoughts?
I got to say, I really appreciated the bit where he was talking about wokeness, because I don't think I've ever actually watched the whole Lafayette piece. I've seen a ton of clips, and I kind of thought to myself, oh, I've probably seen the whole thing at this point.
Yeah.
And I always said to myself, oh, one of these days I should just sit down and watch it, and I just never have. So I kind of appreciate sitting down and listening to that, and the whole idea, because in the main show, was it Charles was the guest?
Yeah, Charles. Yeah.
Yes, Charles. Charles pointed out about this exact point about the roots of conservatism in systems, whereas like we're a little more natural, and how Michael Brooks differentiated it in this, and I'm just like, yeah, no, that's really I never quite thought of it that way, and I don't think I've seen that part of this video. So
Yeah, I think he has. I think he has a lot of good stuff to say. I mean, here and elsewhere in the book, and in the and in some of what he was doing to promote the book, and like in some of what he was saying on the show, and in the sort of like, those little streams that even before COVID, like he would do some few streams, like kind of from the apartment, kind of doing the taking chat questions and stuff, and like some of those. He was, I think he had a lot of really useful things to say about how, like, both the kind of offering of the positive vision and the, and the like debunking of the right, sort of goes along with like a critique of the left, that because it's like, well, if your enemies are prospering, they're probably exploiting real weaknesses on your side.
Yeah, I had three thoughts actually about because
just three thoughts in general.
Yeah, and I'll just repeat them ad nauseum. Well, I guess first thing is, like, I think it's always been a little heavy for me, and that I wasn't so familiar with his work before becoming involved, with this show, and I think I wasn't seeking out as much his stuff because it's kind of heavy, to be like, I just want to watch this casual video, just to learn a little bit, when I'm like, it's but that said, I'm actually coming to him a little bit more fresh in a way, and it's really, really impactful for me, I would say, to watch. I think a couple things. First of all, I recently got a chain, and I was like, I can't wear it on the show, it's too douchey. But now I'm like, no, he's fucking rocking the chain. I'm gonna wear it open button. You know what I mean? Like, he's empowering me there.
Well, I mean, you could really go full Michael and start showing up in an Adidas tracksuit.
The tracksuit,
if Michael would want to, probably would want to vote how to pinky ring, just
exactly.
Not for anything else. Not that he likes the look or anything, but just because it'd be like, yeah, it's I love Sopranos.
Exactly. But the second thing I was thinking is that I think sometimes on the left, I don't know, there's just so much common sense exuding from him, and I think a mistake we make on the left is this weird fetishization, as if the people that we have to convince aren't liberals, right? They're like this disaffected group of people that know nothing about the left or the right, and then we're just gonna get them on our side and mobilize this mass base. But I think it seems to me, at least, that he understands pretty deeply that a lot of the people that you have to convince are probably run-of-the-mill liberals right now. And I think, some people who describe themselves as woke, I think he does a really good job. Maybe some of them would get angry at seeing that, but I think he does a really good job of explaining the critique in a way where they might say, oh, I understand where these Bernie-crats are coming from. You know what I mean? And it's just that it's not about downplaying, at least from his point. It didn't seem like it was about downplaying race and just being like some kind of weird class orthodox, like, like almost like religiously worshiping class, which I think it can't come across, if you're just a more run-of-the-mill Democrat. But he explained the origin of that critique and why, why it's there in a way that I don't, obviously some people might be pissed off seeing that, but I think if you're at all persuadable, I think it could be pretty convincing, and I think that there's probably precious little, or I feel like there's not enough of that, at least, where, there's not enough of actually trying to put your argument in a way that will convince, and I know that's a big goal of this show, but just in general, like actually putting your argument in a way that's not going to alienate people and actually show them, why it's wrong. And I think that, like, with, I agree with you. I hate astrology and all that kind of shit. But, but the point is that if you're looking, a lot of people are obsessed with politics, but a lot of people are they want some political content, but they also just want content about, like, how to live their lives and be better people, So, like, if we don't offer a holistic approach or a holistic perspective, I could see why, someone might turn off the 100th conversation about, whatever, like, why the Democrats suck in favor of Jordan Peterson being like, this is how you should live your life or whatever.
That's pretty good.
Just keep going, man.
I'm doing an impersonation of Michael's impersonation, which apparently people do a lot, right? So no, I was like, sometimes, and if I think about whether some of this stuff is
can you do a Nelson Mandela?
Please no. But if for me, some of this YouTube stuff, if it's just a lark or if it's actually just seeing him, I'm like, I can almost see how it's like an actual project, not just something to do for fun. So anyway, forgive my rant, but I actually haven't watched a lot of his stuff because of that reason. So I think it's great to actually dig into it, also not by myself, where I'm just thinking about how sad it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That we lost him.
Yeah. Look, it took me a year to write that fucking introduction, like that's the reason for that. I think that, I think everything you're saying makes sense. And I think that, like there are, in that presentation, there are some Michael Brooks eccentricities, like he has, it's kind of a deep cut, but like he has this like really weird way of using the phrase primitive accumulation, where he just sort of means like, anytime, like he just sort of generally applies it to like anything that's like a sort of quick, brutal attempt at economic expansion, which is like not exactly what that term, typically means or whatever, but so it's like, I just like that, just, just kind of caught that as it was going by at the end, but like, but yeah, I think that but I think a lot of it like is incredibly good, both in the analysis and also in the sort of way he's like that part you guys were talking about, the sort of socialism and woke discourse part. Like he has, like you can kind of tell he spent like hours and hours talking to like Adolf Reed, and like, but then like he's the whole, but then like he does the Michael Brooks thing, and he's like, okay, how can I do this in 2.5 minutes for like an audience of like college students who, like you said, are probably just kind of like normie liberals and whatever, right? Like that, and how can I sort of like boil down this idea of what that what that distinction is. And like, probably like, I mean, Matt, if I were in that position, I would probably have done it in a much more polemical way that might have been as useful, right? Because like, my instinct would be to like, be like arguing with him a little bit more, and like, and I think what he's really doing there is like a little bit more just like kind of like, hey, this is this really cool idea. I'm going to explain it to you, right? Here's what's going on with this whole debate, and now you get it. And it sounds like, as you said, that I don't know that it would like necessarily convince everybody right away or whatever, but it would be like I think you're right. I think anybody who's at all persuadable would at least hear that and be like, okay, that's interesting. I think maybe I have some idea of what you're saying or something.
Yeah,
like that.
or let's say you were like trying to explain those ideas to someone who didn't get them, right? That's like a clip you would send, right? Like
Totally,
to be like you're not going to send them the angry polemicist who's just like being like these woke motherfuckers, like yeah, you wouldn't.
No, totally right.
Yeah.
No, I kind of wish we had a Richard Linklater film where it's just like Michael Brooks arguments, just for an hour and a half of just somebody wandering around Austin or something, and it's
the
just
Michael Brooks Waking Life.
Yeah, exactly. Somebody get on that.
You have been watching free public content from Give Them an Argument. To access every single episode of the show, the main show on Monday nights, all of the streams, all of the debate breakdowns, all of the patron-exclusive post-games on Monday nights, all of the patron-exclusive bonus episodes every week, and much, much more, go to patreon.com/Ben Burgis. I cannot resist ending this with, don't be foolish.